ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, May 1st, only on Netflix.
Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Hi, friends. This episode is going to light a fire under you because if you've ever sat in a meeting and thought, this culture doesn't match the message, or why does leadership feel so disconnected, or all these things are happening and we're really anxious about our jobs, layoffs, tariffs, and there's been complete silence, zero communication, then this conversation is for you. I'm talking to Alejandra Ramirez, a powerhouse in internal communications, and a woman who has spent nearly 2 decades helping organizations turn confusion into clarity and chaos into culture. After 15 years in the pressure cooker of big law, she founded Ready Cultures to do one thing: help leaders actually lead. This isn't fluff. This is the real deal on what's missing in your team's communication. If you're a CEO, if you're on a board, if you're a COO, a CHRO, or a leader in any form in your organization, whether that's officially by title or not, she's going to help you understand how to fix it and why it matters now more than ever. So buckle up. Grab a pen and get ready to rethink how you show up at work because one small shift could change everything. Hey friend, let's talk. If you've been feeling stuck, uninspired, or just plain over it in your career, this is your wake-up call. It's time to stop waiting for that right moment and start making moves because no one is coming to rescue you. If you want to check out the Mastering the Career Pivot, my brand new masterclass is designed to help you take control of your career, pivot with confidence, and land a job you actually love. This isn't some fluffy, follow your dreams nonsense. This is real strategy to get unstuck and take action now, right now. Here's what you get. 1 hour of video training with me, breaking down the exact steps you need to take. 1 hour or maybe 2 hours, depending on your process, of self-paced exercises to map out your career pivot plan, a free career pivot guide to walk you through the process, a clear, actionable roadmap so you can stop second guessing and start making moves. And if you want to go even deeper, you can grab the Pivot Package, a powerful set of tools, including a detailed workbook and 3 must-have spreadsheets to track your job search, networking, and applications like a pro. And let me just say, if you're going out there expecting to just apply for a job, the first job, and get it, maybe you're one of those people and maybe you do. But if you're like most of the rest of us, you get a job based on people you know. And statistically speaking, that's true, as well as in my own lived experience and career journey. So networking is really a huge part of it, but a lot of us don't know how. And so a spreadsheet where you can track that, break it down, figure out what to talk about. I have some sample interview questions, or you can do informational interviews. There's so much there in the Pivot Package that is part of my own journey that helped me when I did a career pivot several years ago. So here's the deal. This course will save you hours of frustration, second guessing, and aimless scrolling on job boards. Not helpful. You don't have time to waste, and your future is waiting. So let's get after it. Go to loriadamsbrown.com/career pivot and sign up for Mastering the Career Pivot today, because your next chapter, it's not going to write itself. Hi, Alejandra, and a very warm welcome to A World of Difference podcast today.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation and to get to know you a little bit better. There are so many things happening around the world right now, geopolitically. Everywhere I travel, people are talking about the changes and the shifts. And you're here today to talk about things related to culture as it applies to all types of variations of what that word means. But my first question for you out the gate is, we're dealing with, I would say, crises right now. So, but when we look at just maybe one crisis specifically and it hits, we see many leaders focusing on a lot of external messaging, but what gets overlooked internally when that kind of thing happens, and why does that actually matter?
It's a really great question. And I think that leaders often prioritize external communication, right? Because that's sort of what people notice. And they talk about press releases and they think about public statements. And internally, employees are sort of left with this vague info or silence. And this creates a vacuum that in many cases can be filled with fear, can be filled with rumors, assumptions. And I think fundamentally, human nature sort of requires this reassurance, right? We're built for community and people just want to know, like, is everything okay? What's happening? How does this impact me? And it's a missed opportunity to support this emotional clarity and stability because leaders are so often focused on that external piece. So I always say what really helps is to try to remember that communication also applies to your people, and communication is a really great way to connect and to, fill this silence that tends to happen when it's not prioritized. And by the way, silence is communication, right? So it's a missed opportunity. And I think employees are often overlooked in a crisis when really they could be your biggest factor for success.
Oh my goodness, could not agree more. Yeah, we've all been on the receiving end of that type of silence, or sometimes what feels like image management done badly. And we've also been in leadership positions where you have the opportunity to share or not share while you're also walking through the crisis. And that's where leadership can be very tricky, but it's so important to communicate. So many companies have these great mission statements, maybe even values that are on the wall, that are beautiful, done by the marketing team, but the day-to-day culture doesn't really reflect them. The systems being created, the documentation, the processes don't reflect these mission statements. What do you think the missing link is?
So to me, the gap is in translation, right? Because values at the end of the day are just words if they're not clearly defined in behavioral terms. And my background is in communication, which is very parallel to a lot of the work you do and people in HR do and operations. And it's important to use definitions and not just words, right? So that missing link is that translation. And the translation is what I do, which is taking these words, this vision, this mission, and turning it into something that people can understand, can relate to, and can essentially use to do whatever work is expected of them to, succeed at their jobs and feel like they're a part of something. And, you hear these words thrown around like collaboration or inclusion, and those all mean different things to different people and to different teams. And so in my experience, culture starts to splinter when people fill in the blanks, right? And so to me, using internal communication helps turn those values into actual tangible daily guidance, right? So clarifying, what does this value look like in meetings, in decisions, in team norms, right? And reinforcing that with stories and rituals and just consistent language, I think is so important and solves for that missing link. And to me, that translation element is so essential, right? It's not enough to declare those values. And you really need to help define what those look like. So that also starts with curiosity and conversation and being able to put yourself in the shoes of the people you're trying to communicate with. I mean, this podcast is a good example, about thinking of different cultures and, what one country thinks of as collaboration may be completely different. And so thinking about who you're speaking to, where they live, the culture they live in outside of work, but just societal culture is also really important. And that's why, to me, that translation is essential.
So important. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about workplace culture and business, and everybody sort of cognitively knows how important it is. Boards care about it, corporate boards care about it, CEOs, COOs, CHROs, of course. And at the end of the day, it's not something you snap your fingers and say, this is our culture. It takes a lot of intentionality, like you said. It takes rituals, things that need the alignment of all of those things are what, at the end of the day, create the culture you want with intentionality. Or you passively sit by and just hope that if you say things like our culture is customer obsessed, that's going to be enough to help people understand what your culture is all about. There's usually so much more nuance to it. I'd love to know what inspired you, though, personally, to focus on culture and communication, and maybe what's one lesson from your experience in big law that all leaders should know?
Yeah, so I worked in law firms for about 15 years, and that's where I really got to practice and sort of build my skills in communication. And I think my work and my experience working in the law firms really helped solidify my passion for communication. But I also think it goes back to just my childhood and my upbringing. My family says when I was little, I always asked why. So I learned I'm from Colombia. I was born in Colombia, came to the US when I was 3. My mom remarried when I was around that same age. Came to the US when I was 2. My mom remarried when I was 3. And my stepdad is American from Texas, US born and raised. 2 very different cultures. So I was raised in a household that had very different cultures and taught me very different ways of seeing things, right? And I remember growing up, I always, would almost serve as a translator sometimes between my mom and my stepdad because the cultural differences, I was kind of that expert at understanding and saying both of those. And my family always says that when I was little, I always asked why a lot. And, if someone was like, oh, we're going to the park, I'd be like, but why? Like everything was a why for me. And so I think I'm just always coming at things from a place of curiosity, which helps me really understand and connect dots that many people maybe don't think about. And then later in life, I actually was diagnosed with ADHD, which when that happened, I think explained so much for me and helped me really realize sort of the power that my neurodivergence actually has, which is this ability to connect seemingly random occurrences into something. And I found often in my career and in life, I was always kind of ahead of what people were connecting. So I would see it before months even or years before something actually happened. And so through that, I found my love for communication. I have a degree in international relations with a minor in court interpretation and translation. And then I got a degree in marketing, a master's in marketing. And so that curiosity has always been what fuels me. And I think just generally always needed clarity to function, right? And so I started building it not just for myself, but for the people around me. And that's what led, I think, me to internal communication. It's sort of, in my mind, that hidden engine of culture, right? It tells people what's safe, what's expected, what matters. And, to your point, sort of what's one lesson that I've learned from, my experience in big law is that, and not even, I would say also larger corporations generally, is that silence isn't neutral, right? When leaders don't communicate clearly and with empathy, especially in high stress moments, people will fill in the gaps, and often what they imagine is far worse than the truth. And so I've learned through just the work I've done and just through seeing the world from my perspective that, it's really important to clarify and explain, because what one person understands is not what another person might understand. And I saw that firsthand growing up, and I saw that firsthand just in my career.
Wow. What superpowers you bring to communications. And as somebody who works in a large corporation, we see this all the time, from either just the team level to the company global level. And when we have things happening like the changes that are happening geopolitically right now, where things seem to be changing really drastically every 5 minutes, what people in Taiwan are experiencing, what people in Europe are experiencing, South America, the United States, as they work within the same company, are slightly different. I mean, incredible superpowers that you bring, both from your bicultural upbringing, your speaking multiple languages. That kind of superpower of that kind of third culture kid experience is so good for global business. But incredibly helpful that you've been in multiple industries as well, that you grew up sort of honing this, and that your neurodiversity allows you to see these connections. I have people in my life that are really great at that too. And every company really needs somebody like that, even on the corporate board level, who can help those communications go forward, because things rise and fall on communication. It's so, so, so important. I'd be curious to know, what's one small, impactful change that any leader can make today to improve communication and alignment within their organization?
I would say, well, and to take a quick step back, you're so right about the geopolitical factors, right? And add in the fact that you've got social media, right? Which sort of amplifies everything from the best of the best to the worst of the worst. And unfortunately, human nature tends to over exaggerate the worst sometimes, and that's just sort of where things go. And so leaders, in addition to sort of that geopolitical aspect, they also have a lot of other things taking up their focus, right? So you've got the proliferation of AI, you've got the very quick and fast changing dynamic of the workplace. It's more hybrid now. It's, there's all these changes and things that affect how a business runs. And I would say that it's important for leaders to, when they are communicating, think about it from the perspective of the people that they are communicating to. And I have this framework that I use, can be found on my website, readycultures.com, called the 3H framework. I can't take credit for the H's. It's called head, heart, hands. It's a tool used in academia, but I found that it's really applicable in internal communication and leadership communication, and it's head, heart, hands. And I would say for leaders, when they're thinking about communication, and by the way, leaders doesn't always mean the CEO, to your point, right? Like leader, it's not a title, right? It's a way of being. And the head, heart, hands framework really helps kind of make sure that you're addressing 3 key elements. So the head is, does this make sense? Am I communicating the facts that need to be communicated so that people are clear about what this even is, right? Then you've got the heart, which is usually the hardest part for people because it's about the connection that comes, the emotional connection, right? So is what I'm saying connecting emotionally? And if not, how do I make it connect? Because I think, again, there are huge cultural differences between countries, between people, between upbringings. But again, I think, in my opinion, human nature strives for community and connection, right? And so the emotional element is always something people strive for and look for, unconsciously or not. I mean, even in marketing, right? People make decisions based on their emotional piece. And so when communicating, you want to think about, how does what I'm saying connect emotionally? And that can look as simple as, if someone's rolling out a new tool, right? How does the tool save people time? Why does it make their life easier? How does it help with their job and how they're doing what they're doing? And then there's the hands, which is it clear for people like what they're expected to do next, right? So, if you're sending this message and they're seeing it and it just says, here's what we're doing and here are the facts and here's why it matters to you, they're going to be like, great, okay, close the email or leave the town hall or whatever it is. And they're not going to get the point, which is, there's something I need to do to help address whatever this thing is that's being communicated. And to me, most breakdowns happen when one of those 3 things is missing. And so I would encourage leaders that they think about, before they communicate anything, they think about that head, the heart, and the hands. And if they can answer those 3 things, they'll be in a much better place, because at that point, your message just becomes more memorable. It becomes more actionable. It's aligned with your culture. It really helps become a real, internal comms really helps become a leadership tool, right? And instead of just a checkbox.
That's so helpful. Yeah. Head, heart, hands. Obviously, some of us have heard that in other realms, but bringing it into corporate communications is really insightful. If there's somebody right now listening to this and they're a leader in a corporation and they're now realizing, they've not really implemented that particular approach, but they're wanting to with their team, maybe give us an example of what that could look like as they go to their team. Maybe it's things going on with tariffs. That's very real right now. And so maybe there's a lot of confusion, what's happening in our company? Is our company going to be okay? Are we going to have layoff? Maybe that's the anxiety happening, right? It's just very real. What kind of advice would you give somebody as they start to think about the head, heart, hands approach for their team?
Say that you don't have to have all the answers to communicate. Meaning, obviously you want to address those 3 points, but it doesn't mean you have to know the answer to the problem that's being addressed. So tariffs as an example. It could be that you're still figuring out how it's going to affect the business and you're still trying to see if there's going to be a pause or if it's not. And so waiting until it's all figured out to communicate something is not going to help. I would say, A, don't wait, and B, lean into transparency and use that framework to say, listen, here's what's happening. We know that the tariffs are a little bit all over the place. We don't really know how it may affect whatever industry we're in, but we're continuing to monitor. And we recognize that this could affect us in one of 3 ways or 4 ways, whatever it may be. And here's what we're doing to stay on top of it. And once we know more, we'll make sure to let you know so that you know what you need to do and how it affects whatever you're doing, right? It goes back to that idea of connection. And I think people, really value that transparency and they value the ability to connect and having information. At least for me growing up, the knowing was better than the not knowing, because then I could make a decision. And if you think of it from a company perspective, employees are not always going to agree with you, but they have to trust you. And at the end of the day, you're looking to recruit and retain the right talent, right? Companies focus a lot on this idea of recruiting the top talent. Well, the top talent is sort of relative for every company. And so I always say, focus on the right talent for you. And so if you're able to communicate the things that need to be communicated, you will benefit from, talent that fits your culture, because they will inevitably be the ones who stay, and the ones who leave, they leave. And that's okay, because you're at least being clear about what your culture is and what is valued.
It's really important. Yeah, I think and I'd be interested to know your perspective on this, because you have the law perspective and then you have the, corporate perspective. And sometimes I see leaders being so afraid they'll say or do the wrong thing, or they'll say something that affects their stock, or they'll say something that makes people think, oh, the business doesn't know what they're doing, that they have to have it all figured out. And so I think what you're saying is really so important, that the silence is a communication, and that can affect all of the business as well. And when you have your employees ridden with anxiety when they don't understand what's happening, you could lose good talent anyway, even in that situation. So if you're going for retention, employee engagement, I do really also agree with you that building trust involves communication. And Dr. Brene Brown, one of the things I love about her research around this, I know, isn't she great? Have multiple books of hers over here, Dare to Lead and others. But she talks about trust as showing up in those small moments. But I mean, and so people often just forget, there's a big moment happening, but this big moment is made up of a lot of little small moments along the way. And so I love what you're saying. I think it really resonates. And I think that what you do in corporate communications is so important right now. It's incredibly important, because we are seeing people kind of do maybe what they think is the safe route. So if somebody's listening and they're a CEO, they're on a corporate board, or maybe they're an executive in a company, and that's the anxiety they're, if I say something, I might say it wrong. I might cause the stock to do something it doesn't want to do when the stock market's already crazy. And what would you say to them to kind of ease that anxiety and give them a compelling reason to communicate?
So many thoughts come to mind. I'm like, they're all bouncing around in my head. I'm like, this and this and this. But, I think, so there's a couple things. So I went to a conference recently, the Conference Board in New York City. I held a corporate communications conference, and they spoke a lot about employee communications. And there was a speaker at one of the panels from Coca-Cola, actually, who said that, I think maybe it was Coca-Cola. Don't quote me on the Coca-Cola piece. It could have been someone else, but it was a big company. And she made a really good point. That was the fact that when you're thinking about your business, your employees are your stakeholders, not the media. So if you're communicating with your employees in a way that's human and empathetic, you're less likely to have that drama enter the media, which then affects the stock, which then affects all this sort of public-facing element. And so when you think about that perspective of, firstly, you're human. Everyone is human. And leaning into that humanity, I think, is really essential. I think it's really easy to try to be this like buttoned up, I am this sort of face of the company, or I am the face of this team. everyone's human. Everyone makes mistakes. And obviously no one wants the stock to plummet. But again, if you lean into this idea that your employees are an essential part of, or are your stakeholders just as much as your shareholders, and that they help make sure things are running effectively and they help make sure that things are not chaotic, it will benefit the stock. It will benefit the shareholders. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would add is be timely. Don't wait, right? You can always go back and change it. The more defensive you sound, the more people are going to criticize. And so sometimes less is more. And sometimes it's, hey guys, we acknowledge this is happening. We need a little bit of time to process this. Give us a couple days. That'll help fill the gap, right? Even in the media, because then the media may see or get whatever leaked communication, because it does happen. But speak to your employees, talk to them. Don't write for the media, don't write for others, because if you get that internal piece right, you're going to get the external piece right.
That's really great advice. I love that. And hopefully that helps ease some anxiety. Just be human. It's okay, right? I think that's
exactly.
It's good advice for a lot of areas of life. All right. Well, I have a few just kind of quick rapid fire questions. You can just say whatever comes off the top of your head, and it doesn't have to be anything, just whatever you think. It's then after this, we're going to have you hang out with our difference makers to go a little bit deeper with them. So first off, what's one word you would use to describe a thriving workplace culture?
Can I do two? I would say living and breathing.
That's nice. Organic. Love that. That's really great. Slack or email?
Oof, I'm an email girly.
Okay. All right. Biggest communication pet peeve in the workplace?
No communication.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yes.
Lack of curiosity.
Yeah, that's good. Favorite book or podcast that shaped your leadership style?
Ooh, so I love the Adam Grant Work Life podcast. I think it is fascinating and fabulous, and I've read many of his books. So, yeah, anything Adam Grant, I would say.
Yeah, he just always says it exactly right. Great communicator. What's your go-to de-stress ritual for a crisis comms day?
I love to disappear into a fiction novel. So once I've gotten through whatever crisis is and whatever it is I've handled, I love to just get a great fiction book, and just kind of dive headfirst into it to kind of disconnect my brain from reality and enter a different world. It's my favorite thing to do.
Love that. Most underrated soft skill in leadership?
Communication.
Yeah, exactly. What's a common corporate buzzword you'd love to retire?
Man, synergy. I hear that a lot. I hear alignment a lot, although I'd say that a lot because of what I do, but synergy is a big one. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, you're not alone. Coffee order? What's your go-to?
So I don't drink coffee, so my go-to is a chai latte.
Ooh. And you're from Colombia originally. How does your Colombian family feel about
trust me, it's a whole thing with my family.
Sure
They're just like, what do you mean?
It's not possible.
It's never, I'm a traitor to my family.
Oh my gosh. What's one cultural value every organization should build into their DNA?
Collaboration.
Really good. Who's a leader, past or present, that you admire for how they communicate?
So one of my first bosses, when I started working in law firms, her name is Tina Vanderven, if you're listening. Hi. We still keep in touch. She was, I think I was really lucky to have her as one of my essentially first bosses in the corporate law firm world, because she was sort of that exemplary model of communicating with heart and sort of leading with empathy.
Aw, thanks, Tina, for being great. Awesome. Well, it's been so great to have you on, Alejandra. Thank you for showing up and bringing your humanity and your head, heart, hands into the conversation, and for just teaching us so much. It's an important conversation right now. Communication is not going away. Corporations, organizations rise and fall, families, friendships, communication is so key. Thank you for bringing your expertise into this conversation, for bringing your differences to the table, and for making a difference in the world. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
That was pure gold. What knowledge, expertise, and wisdom all wrapped up into one in this conversation. I mean, she brought head, heart, hands, which is something some of us are familiar with, into this idea of corporate communications. And this could not come at a better time. We don't need to lean into silence. We need to be communicating with employees as our stakeholders, whether you lead in a nonprofit, in corporations, in government, or in your family right now. Maybe you have teenagers that are getting really stressed about what's going on. Gen Z has very high rates of anxiety, and they're wondering what's happening with your family with all the geopolitical shifts. If you're sitting here thinking, wow, that was exactly what my boss, my coworker, my whole dang team needs to hear, then share this with 5 people you know, maybe in your team itself, maybe in your family, maybe with friends, maybe you know people from your college days that you think really could benefit from this conversation. And then you get together maybe on a call and you discuss it, or you get together on your messenger chat, whatever one you use, and you give your 2 cents about what this conversation was like for you and how it's showing up for you in your everyday life. This is a very relevant conversation, and our conversations here are just the starting point. It's just to instigate you having conversation with your coworkers, with your team, with your loved ones, with your friends, and how to process some of the things that are going on as humans. We're just human after all. And like Alejandra said, leaning into your humanity is the way we're going to make a difference in corporate communications and in all types of communication. So share this episode with 5 people who need to hear it right now. And these 5 people are hopefully going to be people who care about doing work that actually matters, because that's what we're here to talk about, is work that's paid or unpaid that we're doing around the world to make our world a better place. Whether it's raising kind humans in your home, whether it's leading a company that's global with 20,000 employees, or whether it's working in a small nonprofit that's grassroots in Indonesia, trying to make a difference in your community. This work that you're doing matters, and how you communicate is everything. So I hope this conversation has made a difference for you, and that it will make a difference with those you share it with, because we don't want to keep this great information to ourselves. This was pure gold, what Alejandra shared with us. And if this hit you in the gut in the best way, please subscribe, leave us a review, and give us those 5 stars. It helps us more than you know. It really makes a difference. Every rating, every share, every review, it tells the world this is a conversation worth having. You were made to lead with purpose. Now get out there and do it. Before we go, I just want to take a moment to thank you. Yes, you. The fact that you're here, tuning in, leaning into these conversations, and doing the hard and beautiful work of making a difference in this world, it means everything to me. In this episode, if it spoke to you, if it brought you healing, hope, or even just a new perspective, I'd love for you to help us spread the word. Subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone you think might need to hear it. Your support helps this community grow and also helps us to keep having these important conversations. You are such a vital part of this journey. And every time you listen, every time you share, you remind me of why we do this, because you are out there making a difference in your own beautiful, messy, and imperfect way. And that matters more than you know. So thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for making the world a little brighter, a little kinder, and a little more whole. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep making a difference. You are loved. All right, listen up, because this can change your life. If you've been feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or just not yourself lately, I need you to hear this. You don't have to go through it alone. Life is hard. Career pivots, relationships, stress, big decisions. It's a lot. And let's be real. Sometimes your best friend or your journal just isn't enough. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp is online therapy that actually works for your life. No awkward waiting rooms, no commute, just licensed professional support from the comfort of your own home on your schedule. Whether you need help processing a big change, setting boundaries, or just getting unstuck, you'll be matched with a therapist that fits your needs. Here's the best part. As a listener of A World of Difference, you get 10% off your first month. Just head over to www.betterhelp.com/difference. That's www.betterhelp.com/difference to get started today. Look, your mental health is everything. You deserve support. You deserve all the healing. You deserve to feel better. So don't wait. Go to www.betterhelp.com/difference and take that first step for your healing today.